interesting thing that happened to us
Is there something in
recently.
your teeth? You should probably floss, like the prep and everything, or
I mean, we didn't really prep. I don't think we were very fertile. So we got.
I was not talking about that part.
Wait, what are you talking about?
All right, hello and welcome to the Frankly Speaking podcast. This is podcast episode number 6. Today I am joined again by my lovely wife Annie,
Hi.
and we will be talking about our journey through parenthood. Basically, what led up to it, um, I guess what happened the day of, and
Yeah.
kind of what we've been up to with 2 kids.
Hmm.
Yeah, so Annie got pregnant. She went through all the normal, like, 3 trimester symptoms, went through
Yeah.
like the mood swings, the like cravings, the throwing up.
Yeah. I had really bad acne throughout this pregnancy, the first pregnancy. It
Mm.
was so bad because I've had acne issues before, and then I went on Accutane, and then I haven't had acne until this pregnancy, and I was just freaking out because I thought my acne was coming back. Oh, also at your one first trimester checkup, they draw like 12 tubes of blood. And no one tells you that. Like, I think that's the one thing that surprised me a lot. It's like nobody prepares you for everything that you're expected to know during pregnancy, and you're just finding out as you go. And that's kind of traumatizing, I feel like.
Yeah, especially like I don't even like when they draw 1 vial of blood for like my yearly checkup. Yeah, I hate needles and like I hate getting my blood taken. And it's like it's kind of unclear why they need so much. I feel like a lot of the tests they run in the States is kind of extraneous.
Yes, I think that's true because I did not get that many tests in Canada, like maybe half. I feel like, I mean, they charge you for every single test that they run, and then they're like, oh, this is necessary, that is necessary. I don't have to do a lot of that in Canada during my second pregnancy.
Yeah, the whole so when Annie was pregnant the second time in Canada, the entire process was way more chill. The
Hmm.
like hospital was more chill. The nurses and doctors seemed less stressed.
Yeah.
They it seemed like there were less. We also had less complications like during the actual birthing process.
Right.
Yeah, in Canada, I don't know why. Maybe people up here or our specific doctors and hospital that we got just a much more enjoyable process. Way
Yeah.
less people too. I'm not sure if it's COVID also
Oh,
impacted
yeah.
that.
So, like, people weren't allowed to just wait around in the waiting rooms. Like, they really made sure they, like, staggered the appointments so
Hmm.
that they didn't have, like, a bunch of people.
So the actual like pregnancy, I don't think there were really too many complications. Really, like we can kind of
No.
skip ahead to when Annie actually needed to go to the hospital. So
Yeah.
like the weeks leading up to the birth, it felt like I was on call, but for like potential having to drive Annie to the hospital
Hmm.
because it was like, all right, I'm basically just waiting to go on paternity leave at this point. I'm
Oh,
waiting
yeah.
to like take Annie to the hospital. We had like the entire trip planned. We had like I don't know, it felt like we were ready, but it still was like a certain nervousness just because it was our first kid. Like who knows
Yeah.
what could
You
happen.
also don't know when to even expect the baby. Like, I feel like I was ready to have the baby at like 38 weeks, and then the baby didn't come until 41 weeks. And you're around 40 weeks, you're just like, okay, is the baby coming? Like, is something wrong with me? Like, why isn't there any movement? Like, I don't feel anything.
Yeah, and like what was hilarious is that we actually went to the hospital the first time and they sent us back because
Oh, yeah.
they're like, yeah, you're not actually dilated enough. Like
Yeah.
you have to go back home.
Okay, so I think that I have like very high pain tolerance because every time I go to the dentist, like I sometimes can have them like, drill holes in my teeth without even any freezing. But
Freezing for all the Americans out there basically means getting your mouth numbed.
oh, okay, yes. And so I was telling Frank the whole time, like, I'm not gonna get an epidural, like I'm just gonna have this baby like the old-fashioned way, like no help whatsoever. And then as soon as like the cramps started coming on, I was just like, I can't handle this, like definitely getting
Yeah.
an epidural.
So like the first time we went to the hospital and he's like, "Oh my God, this is so much pain. Like the baby's coming." We go to the hospital and basically we're there for like 8 hours and the nurses are like, "Yeah, you're not having this baby. You need to go back home. Like you're not
Yeah.
even close." And
Yeah,
he's like,
I was
"Oh
like
my God."
dilated like 1 centimeter or something, and you needed it to be 10
Yeah,
centimeters.
yeah, yeah. And they had Annie like walking around the hospital and stuff and basically to see if like she would dilate anymore. And basically
It did not move at
yeah,
all.
it was Yeah, so we go back home and basically it's like a false alarm. Later on, so like you hear the stories like, oh, your water breaks and that's when you know it's ready.
Hmm.
Like Annie's water actually never
Never broke.
broke.
Yeah. It's actually a myth, not a myth, like, but a very small percentage of the people have their water break actually. Like
Mm,
10% or something. Really ridiculous. Like it's not like in the movies.
yeah, so like the next time we went, basically the nurses and doctors are like, do not come back until the pain is like an 11 out of 10. Like it's
Mm.
absolutely unbearable. And like basically every night, Annie would get these terrible cramps because our kid is essentially, he's like kind of upside down and he's like kicking the back of her spine.
Yeah.
And so I have to like push against her back. And like every couple hours, she'll wake me up, be like, "Oh my God, I'm in so much pain. Get up!" And
No,
like,
not even every couple hours, like every 10 minutes once I started like having the contractions.
yeah. And it was like, so neither of us were getting good sleep. And then luckily for me, Annie's parents, I think the
My
last like,
mom was already here, like,
yeah.
cause in anticipation. Okay, I gotta tell the story because basically at this point, Frank is already very exhausted. But then he was like, "Yeah, babe, just I'm gonna go to sleep now. But whenever you feel pain, just wake me up." And I was like, "Okay." And if you're really tired, like, I'll just go to my mom and she can like take over for half of the night. He was like, "Okay." And then, and then I like whenever the next time I felt pain, I was like, "Hey, Frank, do you want to press on my back again?" And he's like, "Just go to your mom."
I mean, it's slight detail changes, but that's roughly what happened. Um, and so the second time, they actually let us stay in the hospital. The first time, I think they still charged us like $500 or something.
Yeah, like they charge you, it's ridiculous. Like obviously we covered a lot of it through insurance, but it was still like if we had no insurance, this baby was gonna cost us like $50,000.
Okay, yeah, to give
Yeah.
you an example of what it's like to have no insurance in China. So like when my mom went back for vacation one time and like right as she left, she twisted her ankle and it was like a pretty bad sprain to the point where she eventually needed surgery for it. And so in China, they had her own private room with a bed and nurse and everything for 2 weeks. And guess how much it cost? 400 USD with no insurance.
Yeah, that's
And
crazy.
so like if you think about how much that would cost here in like the
You would
States,
like go into debt forever for the rest of your life.
you would be, yeah, without insurance, you'd be absolutely destroyed.
Yeah.
So it's kind of crazy to see that like most other countries are more sane in the sense that like they're not going to completely destroy your finances if you get sick and you need a hospital
Hmm.
bed. Um, won't really go into that tangent about how the U.S. healthcare system is completely screwed up. Canada obviously has universal healthcare, has its own
Hmm.
issues, but is obviously a much better system.
Yeah.
But I guess we can also highlight some of those differences as we kind of continue
Yeah,
talking
the
about our
second.
stay.
Yeah.
So we're now in the hospital. Luckily, we did get a private room. Um,
Hmm.
Annie's parents are here, or is it just your mom or both
No,
parents?
my dad made it like on the night that I was giving birth.
Oh, okay, so he came later.
Yeah, he came later.
Yeah, and this room, like it was clearly not meant for multiple people to be in there with the wife. Like there's one seat that reclined kind of into a bed, and the room was friggin' freezing. Like I don't know why they turned
Oh.
down the temperature so low. Like we were all
Huh.
freezing in there, and they gave us like these thin blankets and like I think eventually I don't even know how your parents slept, but like the food they gave us
Hmm.
was basically non-existent. They had like this kind of lunch break room where you could pay for food, but it was all overpriced and like
I don't
crappy
even
hospital
remember that.
food.
I felt like I was just immersed in pain.
Well, like Annie, they didn't let her eat
Yeah.
because she got an epidural. So basically,
Yeah.
after that, she couldn't eat. And like after she got the epidural, she was fine. Like prior to it, she was in a ton of pain.
Screaming.
Yeah, but after it, she was able to like sleep and
Yeah,
be
I was
okay.
sleeping. Yeah.
But like the rest of us, we were just like extremely uncomfortable because like
Hmm.
even though we were allowed to be in the room with her, this was pre-COVID, pre all the
Yeah.
craziness. It
It was
was
such a small
a
area, like
small room
maybe this big, and the three of you had to like fit in
cram in
there.
there. And the five guys we got was actually terrible because it was like kind of cold and soggy by the time we ate
Hmm.
it, but it was still like better than any of the hospital food by far.
Yeah.
Which The hospital food actually got better after you gave birth, but that's kind of later on
Yeah,
in the
I
story.
mean, like they charge you for it and
Yeah, man.
everything. So, yeah.
But like the kind of one thing that stood out to me was how stressed the nurses were. Like clearly they were overworked and understaffed,
Yeah.
and they were like snapping at each other, blaming other departments for all the like the smallest things,
Yeah.
and like it made us stressed as well because like we're
Yeah.
this is our first birth, we don't really know what to
Right.
expect.
So at this point, I've already been in the labor for 72 hours. I was even telling Frank, like, at this point, I just want a C-section. Like, I don't want to go through this anymore. It was so painful. I would rather they gave me some drugs and just cut me open. Like, that was going to be easier than whatever labor was. But then, I went through with it and then got the epidural and it finally felt a lot better. And then the nurses come and then they're supposed to, like, connect me up to an IV. And the nurse tried 4 times and she missed my veins. And she legally could not perform on me anymore. So she had to leave and get another nurse. And I was just kind of like, Jesus, like, who is treating me like they can't even put an IV in me properly? Like, who is this nurse?
And there are complications. So like
Mm-hmm.
our kid, every time Annie tries to push, his heartbeat will slow down because the umbilical cord is wrapped around his neck. And so we're in like a pretty dangerous spot. We're like, what the
Mm-hmm.
hell? Like, what do we do? Right? Because the kid, as he's going down, and it's like his heartbeat's dropping, they're like, oh shit, like stop doing what you're doing. Let's try to like figure out what to do. Eventually, when Annie actually gave birth, the doctor was actually pretty skilled in
Yeah,
what she
she
did.
was a good doctor.
She like, but it was very violent. She like grabbed his head, like yanked him out so hard that he had like bruises on his head when he was born, and she like quickly unwrapped the umbilical cord from his neck, and then like what they don't tell you is like the baby had like all this poop and pee and just like it looks like this little purple alien. It's like a little Thanos just got born,
Yeah.
and it was so gross.
Yeah, like Frank's face. Like, you were just standing next to me and he was like,
but like clearly she was super skilled and like unwrapped it from his neck, got this like little suction cup suction out like the
yeah.
poop and pee from his mouth.
And then they're handing him to me, and he
Mhm.
just poops all over me, like he's pooping as they were handing him to me.
But luckily he was healthy. There were no
Yeah.
other complications really. He was crying, which is a good sign. If your baby's not crying, that's usually
Hmm.
extremely worrying because it's like maybe that's a sign something's wrong. But our kid came out pretty healthy. We had like no idea how to really feed him at first, and so like you're supposed to try to breastfeed him, and it's like your milk doesn't come immediately. It
Hmm.
like comes gradually, and so like Annie's trying to breastfeed our kid for like hours and hours and hours, and she's like, okay, he must be full now, right? Because like
Yeah, not hours, hours. I'd be like, I have him on my breast for like 5 minutes. I'm like, he's good. And then I will hand him back. But he just keeps on crying. I'm like, what's wrong with him? I literally just fed him.
and basically it's because he's not getting any food at all.
Yeah.
It's basically like starving, and like babies lose a ton of their body weight in the first couple of days
Right.
because the milk hasn't come in. And eventually they fed him a bottle just to like calm him down, and also so like he would get some sort of nutrition. We were also inexperienced, like we didn't understand how the latching worked or anything.
Yeah. Well, like no one kind of tells you how long you're supposed to have the baby on the
Hmm.
breast for. And like, I feel like my mom didn't tell me either. Like,
And the nurses were like kind of
yeah.
forceful. They were like, they'd take our kid's head and like shove it against Annie's
Yeah.
breast and be like, eat, latch on. And I'm like, dude, chill. Like, what is going on?
Yeah. There's a nursery that they can actually take your baby away for the night and basically help you take care of the baby while you guys get some sleep. So
Mhm.
initially, Frank and I definitely did not want to do that. But then by the third day, we were like, okay, we really need to
We're
take
actually dying.
advantage of this. So we sent him away, and then they were supposed to bring the baby back to you for a feed around like 2 a.m. And when they brought him back, he was just out. He like
Yeah.
was not crying, and I was freaking out because like we were used to him just crying the whole
Crying
time.
constantly. And we were thinking, like,
Yeah.
what happened? Did they drug our baby?
Yeah, like
But no, they just fed him.
no, well, they said they didn't feed him. They said if
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, but we think that they did feed
Yeah,
him.
we think
Like
that they
he was
did.
probably crying so much that they were like, we're just gonna give him whatever.
I mean, it's like, it makes sense that he was crying because it's like, oh, he was born. It's been like 2 days. He's gotten like zero food.
Yeah.
And so there was actually a
No.
baby next door to us that was crying even more
Right.
hysterically. And like even though our kid was crying pretty much all the time, their kid was like absolutely screaming and
Right.
just like sounded like they were, I don't know what was
Yeah.
going on,
We
but
thought we were pretty lucky already
mhm.
because he didn't. Oh, also for the first day, like the first night, the baby's usually really good because they're still used to like being in the womb and just sleeping most of the time. And on the second day is when they start to like realize that they're like in this new environment, and that's when they start to cry a lot more. So like the second day is probably the hardest.
And they're also starving at that point.
Yeah.
Starving, dehydrated,
Yeah.
and oh, so a lot of Asian babies have a problem with jaundice or potential problem, and it's
Mm.
basically like this yellowing of the skin. It has to do with their metabolism, and basically it's like after you start feeding them, it goes away as their like natural system flushes it out. However, what ended up happening is when that happens, and like when they tested him for it, he was kind of borderline again. He's like, they could have done it, they could have not. Obviously, they recommend that you do it. So they come out with this like blue light thing that's supposed to help, and it's like basically cooking your baby. It's like
Yeah,
you're
it's
putting,
so
it's
hot.
so hot. It's putting him in like this little oven, and like we
Yeah.
didn't really understand how to like swaddle him correctly. So the nurse would come
Hmm.
in, swaddle him, puts him in 3 layers
Yeah.
in swaddle, and puts this freaking oven blue light on him,
Yeah.
and he's like literally burning up. He's like being cooked.
Yeah, this nurse didn't know what she was doing. Like other nurses were only swaddling him in like one
One.
blanket,
Hmm.
and then this nurse came with like three.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Probably because she's like, oh, I do this for everyone else because like other babies probably didn't have that blue light thing.
right.
But like eventually we leave the hospital, everything's fine. We're like tired. The food was surprisingly decent, so
Yeah,
we got like a meal allowance.
Frank's for like
Um,
favorite part.
the only like yeah, the only really positive experience, other than like the doctor being super skilled in the
Hmm.
delivery, but the only other positive experience was like the food was okay. It was handled by this like third party contractor, and the nurses the entire time were just like talking down on them, be like, "Oh, they suck. They like
Yeah,
always get the orders wrong. They're not timely. Blah blah blah." And I was thinking like, "This is they're
right.
fine." Like,
I feel like one time we just didn't get our food for like hours, and then
yeah,
like
there
they
was
messed
one
up.
meal that they were late,
Hmm.
and the nurses were just like, "Yeah, I gotta have a talking with them." Blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
But I mean, we finally got to go home. I don't remember how long your mom stayed with us.
I think my mom stayed for 3 weeks, and then we had him for about. Oh no no, my mom came for 3 weeks, and then your parents came to
Oh, that's
visit
right.
right
That's right.
away, and then your dad and brothers left after a week, and then your mom stayed with us for 6 weeks, and then we had the baby to ourselves for like 2 weeks, and then my mom came back.
Hmm.
So like we had a ton of
Yeah,
help.
we were super
Yeah.
lucky. But even with the help, it still felt like we were dying because, like,
Yeah.
essentially the baby in those first couple of months is like nonstop crying, and like you have to change their diaper essentially like every
Hmm.
hour or so. They're
Yeah.
taking like 20-minute naps and then waking up crying, and you have to figure out like, is the baby hungry? Does the baby need a diaper change? Is the baby crying for some other random reason, like just is lonely or something? Like there's so many
Yeah.
things. You basically have this checklist of things you go down, and you have no time for anything. And not only do you have no time, but you're also extremely sleep deprived and
Hmm.
cranky. And so, like,
Yeah.
without the help of our parents, like, we would have been absolutely destroyed.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't actually remember too much from it, like it just felt like a blur. Our first son was a really slow eater. So like I would have to have him on my
Mhm.
breast for like 40 minutes for him to get a full meal. But then if I put him down for another like 20 minutes, and it's like time for him to eat again. So it
Right.
just felt like I was breastfeeding him constantly.
In the beginning, Annie's milk didn't come in for a while because we just didn't understand how that process worked. And so we had to supplement with bottles.
Hmm.
And so eventually, like Annie said, she got to the point where she was just so tired and like could not handle breastfeeding the entire time. She started pumping. And what would happen is then she could actually get like 4 hours of uninterrupted
Right.
sleep.
Yeah.
And then we would basically take shifts. So like I would take this shift from like, I don't know,
9 until 3 a.m. or something like
yeah,
that.
9 p.m. till 3 a.m. And then like either my mom or your mom would take.
No, I would take him from 3 a.m. until like 7.
Oh, okay. And then our
Yeah.
parents would take like that
Yeah.
morning shift
Morning shift
slash day
for
shift.
like yeah, from like then Frank slept from like 3 until like 12 the next day, and then I was usually up from like 3 till 7, and I'll go back to sleep from like 7 to 12 kind of
Hmm.
thing, and then we would take over again.
But yeah, eventually we got into like an okay system where like we were all tired, but it was bearable.
Hmm.
And it just kind of slowly got better from that point. We obviously were fighting a lot more even after the initial months because once the parents left and it's like, okay, now we have to juggle our work and our chores and all the stuff we were doing before in addition to having a kid. And so
Right.
like a common problem that occurs after you have your first kid is that each person thinks that they're doing more than the other. And that's actually not true. It's just because each person is both doing more than they previously were. And so it
Mm-hmm.
feels like, oh, well, like, why is my partner not picking up the slack? But in actuality, like, there's just more work to go around. And so even though you're each doing more, it feels like, oh, the other person's slacking. Like, how come I'm doing all
Mm-hmm.
this extra stuff? Like, they're not picking up their end of the bargain or whatever. And eventually, like, we kind of figured that out just through talking it out. And we also optimized a lot of our lives. So like
Mm-hmm.
we started only using paper plates because essentially like we wouldn't have time to like clean up after ourselves. It just made the whole process a lot easier. At the time, we were living in a condo, so we could just throw all of our stuff away after a meal.
Mm-hmm.
That helped a lot.
And then once the baby turned 6 months, we got a nanny for like a very short brief of
Yeah.
time. It got easier also because the baby got a little bit older as time
hmm
went.
He actually loved our nanny. So like we would be
Yeah.
working at home or actually there's like pre-COVID I was still going we would both commute to work sometimes
Right.
and so the nanny would come in the morning take the kid from like I don't know 7 till 4
Yeah.
every day and I would have to like rush home from work to relieve the nanny take the kid and then
Uh,
basically take care of the kid by myself until Annie came home because she
at like
commuted to the
6
city.
p.m.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Annie had like an insane commute.
Yeah, I
uh,
will have to get up at 5 a.m. and then commute for 2.5 hours,
mhm,
go to work, and then come back at like 6. But I only did this like 3 times a week. So then the
mhm,
other 2 days, I was home.
mhm. And
Yeah.
so essentially it was like the days that Annie did commute though, like I would be dead on those days
Yeah,
because
like I would come home and Frank is just like,
yeah, because it's like I go to work, I come back from work, I have to rush to come back from work, and then I'm like taking care of this screaming child for
yeah.
like 2 hours by myself, and then I'm like, oh my God, I'm just like dying right now. It got to the point where our kid would be so happy to see the nanny because she was spending
Mm,
so much time with him, and like he would sleep a lot of the night, and so
yeah.
essentially it's like his best hours most of the daytime he would spend with the nanny, and we were
Hmm.
both thinking like, man, what is this like?
Yeah, every time she would come, he would just have this biggest smile on his face and start crawling over to her. And I don't know, definitely a little bit of like jealousy
Yeah,
from us.
and then COVID kind of hit. No one really knew what was going on. Both of our workplaces went remote.
Hmm.
We let our nanny go just because she's exposed to all sorts of people. And at that time, we are like, okay, we just want to be extra safe. Like, we don't want anything to potentially happen to our kid. We don't want to get COVID. And so at this point, we're working from home. We're both working slash taking care of the kid, and we'll be like having meetings with our kid.
Yeah, that was stressful because like it's crazy like when you have to entertain your kid and like bounce him while you're like trying to have an intelligent conversation with people at work.
hmm
It's like after like a 30-minute meeting, you're just completely exhausted.
hmm
It's actually crazy. So
Yeah.
like we were like this is not sustainable at all.
And what also happened is like we were originally planning to send him to daycare at six
Hmm.
months, but of course, when COVID hit, a lot of daycares actually closed down, and so
Yeah.
we couldn't send him anymore. And then the even before that point, it's like daycares were extremely in demand, and so if you even wanted to get in, you had to like apply many months in beforehand and like
Hmm.
do all this sort of prep and stuff. And then so we're basically like trying to juggle work, home, our relationship. Another thing that like people kind of talk about is like before you have a kid, all your time is your own. After work,
Mm.
if you want to play video games for 8 hours, you can do that. If we wanted to like go out and eat a meal in a place that's 2 hours away, we're free to do that. If we want to just to like do nothing and chill, like maybe watch a movie
Yeah.
or TV or whatever, you're free to do that. But once you have a kid, it's like all of that free time goes out the window. Like
Hmm.
the one regret that I do kind of have that I wish that we did before having children was really take like a world trip,
Yeah.
because now it's way harder to do that with kids.
Hmm.
Like they have a bunch of equipment essentially that they need in order to
Yeah.
not be extremely frustrated. And so it's like I guess it almost wouldn't have worked out because like when COVID hit anyway, a bunch of countries started closing down, and like we wouldn't have been able to travel everywhere that we wanted to anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's like, yeah, I think the thing that gets talked about sometimes, but it's like if you really have to make sure that like you understand what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah. Like I feel like when I really wanted to have a kid right away just because I had like baby fever and we had talked about it before having this kid and you were kind of like, oh, I prefer to wait, but then you didn't really like put your foot down or anything like that. So then I was just kind of like, oh yeah, we're just gonna have a kid. And I felt like if we just like really understood what it meant to have a kid, like I think before I just assumed that I can do all the same things that I could do before just with a kid now, but like that's not really true.
Yeah, and like another thing that doesn't really get talked about is a thing called postpartum depression, where like
Mm-hmm.
after the woman has a kid, she like gets super sad essentially. And Annie can talk
Mm-hmm.
more about that.
Actually, I didn't really experience it because we had a ton of help from our parents, and then Frank took paternity leave, and he was just also very helpful around the house. So I think I cried one time over spilt milk, where like because our kid ate so much, like I wasn't able to keep up with his demand. And so when I like there was one time where I pumped and then it spilled, I just like got so emotional. And if you think about it, it's pretty ridiculous. Like, oh, it's just milk. Like you can have formula or something. But like
Mhm.
you're so emotional for no reason that I just felt like my world was going to end. And that's an example of like what postpartum depression might look like or feel like, but I would say that I was lucky to not have experienced too much of it.
Yeah, I think what really the key point that Annie mentioned is like we had a lot of help and I also had pat leave. So like a lot of women who go through it is because they don't have a lot of help. Like you're expected to have the kid and essentially bounce back super quickly. So now not only do you have like a kid to take care of, but maybe you're a lot more isolated from your friends because now you
Mm-hmm.
don't have any free time. And also you might have lost a career, like you can't work anymore. And your entire identity shifts from, okay, before I might have been like a wife or independent person with all these hobbies. I might have had this career to now
Mm-hmm.
completely different to, okay, now I'm a house care taker, I'm a child provider, I'm a mother. And that shift can be really difficult if you don't have a lot of support from family and friends.
Mm-hmm.
If you're like going through that alone, is one of the causes. And then, like Annie said, like crying over nothing. Like there's a lot of hormonal stuff that happens that's like I'm not qualified to talk about, but it's not just like the woman being crazy. Like there's a lot of changes happening in the
Yeah.
body, a lot of hormones affecting your mood, and
Yeah.
so
And also like you're basically putting yourself for this like out for this baby. You're doing everything you can for this baby and the baby is not appreciative of you at all. Like especially when they around 6 months they start growing teeth and they start biting you. Like I get so pissed off when they bite me. I'm just like, God damn it. And then they will like look at you and be like, ha 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 ha. Like it's the funniest thing ever.
yeah, and all of this is really
Oh,
amplified by the sleep deprivation. Like
yeah.
it's like during the night, the baby's gonna get up minimum X number of times, and so you're not gonna have like a full night's rest, and then you have to work the next day, and then
Yeah.
there's like not really a break anywhere in there.
Hmm. Oh, I would say that the other thing that we were really lucky with is like we sleep trained our kid very
Super
early.
early.
Like he was able to sleep in his own room at 3 months. So we were able to sleep full nights once he turned 3 months. I think that's another reason why our lives
Yeah,
became so much easier later on. But we have friends who like they co-slept with their baby until they were like 2. Like
co-sleeping basically just means
yeah,
that the kid will sleep in the same bed with you.
same bed. And like they would either sleep apart from their husband for a full year or two and with the baby alone. And then they might have their own careers and they have to work the next day but be expected to like take care of the baby at night. I just think like that's a lot and I personally would not be able to do that. Like I would go crazy. Yeah.
So a really funny story about sleep training the kid. So when sleep training, there's a bunch of methods to do it, but
Mhm.
essentially what happens is your kid cries a ton and they
Mhm.
cry hysterically. They cry at the top of their lungs and our walls are pretty thin. And
Yeah.
so like as we were trying to sleep train the kid, someone actually knocked on our doors like, "Hey, is everything okay in there?" Like
Yeah.
cuz our kid would just be literally nonstop screaming for like an hour and
Yeah.
to the point where his voice got like hoarse.
Horse. Yeah.
Um, There's also like something that people don't talk about that happens is a thing called sleep regressions. So even
Mm-hmm.
after you know, quote unquote, sleep train your kid, they're sleeping through the night. It's not consistent. Like it doesn't just stay that way.
Right.
Like so our I won't reveal how old exactly our kid is, but basically, like even to this day, he will still have sleep regressions to the point where like he won't want to go, he will wake up during the night crying for XYZ reasons. Like there's normal development stages that they hit in their like mental capabilities, and it's a natural process. Which I don't know if people talk about this in like the whole parent circle. I didn't really know about any of it
Mm-hmm.
before we lived through it, but it's like completely normal. But it's also extremely like damaging to your mental health because it's like, oh my God, we just put in all that effort. We thought we were like finally getting
Yeah.
back to some semblance of normal. And then it's like, nope, JK, like get
Right.
wrecked. You're not going to go to sleep anymore.
And like some people might be like, oh, he's just going through a sleep regression. Like, let me go off my schedule for the next couple weeks. But like, what you're really supposed to do is you're supposed to maintain consistency. You can kind of give in once in a while, but like mostly still have a schedule. And then eventually he'll just like go back to it on his own.
The most hilarious sleep regression was when he first learned how to stand up.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he learned how to stand up, but he didn't know how to sit down. And so what would happen is he would go to sleep, and then sometimes he would wake up in the night and just instinctively stand up in his crib. But he'd be too scared to sit back down and go to sleep. So he would do, he would run circles around his crib,
I should
like
like find that footage and
yeah,
like,
like holding onto the sides of the crib until he got so tired, collapsed from exhaustion, fell asleep because it's like a kind of dramatic collapse. It would wake him up, in which
yeah.
he would stand up again and be unable to get down, and then repeat the process
Yeah.
until he was so tired that he would just like sleep and then not get back up anymore.
Yeah, I would say like this is only specific to this
The
baby.
first kid, yeah.
Yeah, I think most babies are not like this, but our first baby is such a scaredy cat. Like he's scared to like he thinks like, "Oh man, that is too high. I cannot I cannot sit down safely."
Yeah,
But
so
like our second baby is like as soon as he learned how to stand up, he also knew how to sit down.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Like the two kids have extremely different personalities.
yeah.
Like they've inherited a mix of our qualities. And
Yeah.
you know, obviously they have some of their own as well.
Hmm.
And like the one thing that at least I kind of learned about myself, and a lot of people notice it at work as well. Um, if people know me, they know I kind of have a fiery personality. I love to argue. I love to get into arguments. I love to debate people on pretty much anything. And you know, I call people out for their BS, even at work. And but then people did notice that once I came back from the first paternity leave, I became a lot more chill, a lot more understanding. A lot of that was probably due to my own sleep deprivation. Like I just didn't have the energy to fight everyone on their BS anymore. And people were like, "Oh my God, Frank, you've changed so much. Like you're more patient, blah blah blah." And I was thinking like, "Huh, well, maybe I changed, I guess." But like to be a bit more serious, I think that like I'm definitely way more patient now
Yeah.
than I was
Yeah,
before.
I think so. Like you're also like more understanding, I think. Yeah.
I think that has more to do with being with Annie than the kids. Like
Mhm.
in the past, I would say, I don't know, 6 years ago, I was not a very empathetic person. I would think a certain way and try to also think like, well, everyone should think about it this way. It's like very logical. It's quote unquote correct. Like it doesn't make sense if people don't do it this way. Like they're wrong, and like it doesn't make sense why they would do it their own way. Rather than thinking about it in the sense of like, well, everyone has their own situation. People have different mental models of how the world works. Um, you know, Annie is much more empathetic, much more people oriented, whereas I'm probably more like logical, idea oriented, like conceptual.
Mhm.
And like when you combine multiple ways of thinking and multiple perspectives, you get closer to like the truth or the like actual what happened of a scenario or problem or issue that you're trying to solve. And I think that's one thing that, in terms of my own personal growth, I've realized over the past couple of years. It's like there is no perfect answer for most things in life. Like a lot of
Mhm.
things are a shade of gray. People like to look at things in black and white because it's easy to conceptualize and bucket things. It's just simple to simplify the world in that way. You shouldn't write someone off just because they share a different belief from you. I think a lot of people, especially online, like they don't want to use their higher order level thinking skills. They don't want to actually conceptualize like, well, how can my position be wrong? they just immediately jump to like, oh, well, this person has this specific belief and they're wrong, and everything about their character is wrong. I can't
Yeah.
support them.
Like they're a bad person just because they don't share this belief or something.
You'll see a lot of people on the right and the left hate each other simply for being with the other party. And that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Like, at the end of the day, we're all people. We're all going to have our own specific beliefs and personal experiences that shaped or molded our personalities. I understand how a lot of people reach that point, and I also understand how easy it is to really relinquish your critical thinking skills and just kind of go along with what everyone else thinks. It's kind of just normal as people, as social creatures. But I think that's really one of the things I want to teach my kids is like, don't just take the popular narrative and adopt it as your own. Like, really try to form your own mental models and figure out what makes sense for you as a person. Because it's like, not only do you do yourself a disservice, but like society in aggregate is just individuals that form groups that eventually forms opinions that becomes societal standards. And if everyone starts to relinquish their own, like, well, how do I determine what's right or wrong? How do I like show empathy for my fellow man? Like, clearly society is going to degrade. And none of us want that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess to get the storyline a bit more on track, I mean, the second pregnancy went a lot more smoothly.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, we were in Canada. We pretty much decided we were
Yeah.
going to have the kid in Canada
Yeah.
for a variety of reasons, and it was a much more pleasant experience
Yeah.
overall. The doctors and nurses were more chill.
We were more chill
We were more
because
chill, yeah.
so the first pregnancy though, every single day I would be Googling like stillbirth, like what happens if like
Mm,
my kid dies, like I was very paranoid, especially because I had the miscarriage first. So then
mm.
I was like, what if I was incapable of actually giving birth to a healthy child? But the second time around, you're just a lot more chill about everything. We just did normal things as normal. I had a much more like healthy relationship with food as well. Like the first pregnancy, I didn't gain a ton of weight, but I gained like 35 pounds. And it was like, I felt like, oh, I could eat just because I'm pregnant. It's okay if I gain a whole bunch of weight, but it's like really hard to lose that weight. So then, second time around, I was just like, let me just, practice intuitive eating, like not go overboard with this. I
To
didn't have
clarify,
acne.
intuitive eating basically just means eating until you're satiated and listening to your body, essentially.
Right. Yeah. And then I also didn't have any acne the second time around. I did think that it was a girl though. Like I thought it was a girl because I didn't have acne. Like a lot of the reactions or like the symptoms from my body were very different from my first pregnancy. So I thought it must be a girl. Also, I just really wanted a girl. And then even after we got the like gender reveal note from the doctor and it said it was a boy, I still firmly believe that there's a chance that they could be wrong. And that even until the day that I gave birth, I was just like, it's still possible that's a girl.
Yeah. The second time around, when the kid came out, he was perfectly healthy.
He
Nothing.
didn't cry.
Yeah, he didn't really cry, which was
Yeah.
strange, but it turns out he's just like
A
a
very chill baby.
very different personality from the first kid. Cried
Yeah.
way less, much higher pain tolerance even to this day.
Yeah.
Um,
He like when the doctor handed him over, he just like lied in my arms and just looked at me with a smile on
Peacefully.
his face, like peacefully. Just
Smiled way more.
smiles way more. He could already put himself to sleep like 2 weeks after we came back from the hospital.
I feel like Annie said, we were just way more relaxed the second time around because we weren't worried about our child randomly passing away from any random
Mm,
thing. Like, we were Googling so many things. Anytime even something slightly out of the ordinary with our first kids would be like, oh my God, is something wrong? Do we have to take him to the hospital? We would like
right.
freak out. Annie
Yeah.
wanted to get like this weird sock thing that monitor his
Oh
vitals.
yeah. It was called the Owlet monitor or something where they send you an alarm if the like baby doesn't have a heartbeat anymore or something.
Yeah, I'm really glad we didn't get that thing.
Yeah, because
And
apparently it's a scam.
yeah, I don't know if it's a scam or not, but it's like they're clearly preying on your fears of like, oh, your kid's gonna die. You need to buy our thing, or
Mm,
you're, you're not gonna have
yeah.
accurate monitoring of his vitals. But clearly, like both our kids are happy, they're
Yeah.
healthy. Um,
Oh, also the second time I understood how to breastfeed him. So
yep.
I kept him on my breast almost the entire time. Like
Hmm.
every time he cried, I just put him back on my breast and I would just like sleep or sit there with him like all the time. I didn't mind. I had a lot more patience for him this time too.
Hmm.
Like the first time I was just like, it's been 5 minutes. What are you doing? And then so he gained so much weight. So typically babies will lose weight the first couple days. He gained weight after
Yeah.
so he was very healthy, and the doctors was all very surprised.
Yeah. So like this time around, we actually had experience, and our second kid was able to actually eat, and so he was all. That's another reason why he was probably way happier and like crying a lot less in the
Yeah,
first
that's true.
couple of days because like he was actually being fed compared to the
Mhm.
first kid who was literally
Just
starving.
starving. Also, so they do come and draw blood from the babies.
Hmm.
They'll take it from the heel, and they test for like jaundice and a few other ones. So with our first kid, I remember like just being like, "Oh, Frank, do you feel sad that they're taking his blood?" And he was like, "No, it's good for him." And then this time, Frank was just like, "How dare they draw blood from my baby?"
Yeah, and oh, so a really interesting part, like when we had our first kid, what you
Yeah.
see in movies and what you kind of hear about in stories is everyone's like, "Oh, you feel this overflowing amount of love for the kid." And when we saw the kid, we're just like, "Huh, this is weird." It's
Yeah,
like,
both of us didn't feel any amount of love. Like we're like, he doesn't look anything like us. Like if and Frank was like, if I didn't see you birth him like out, I wouldn't even know that this is my kid.
yeah, and I think it's like you have a lot of expectations from the media. If it's like you see people becoming a new parent and like immediately you love the kid, but like that love kind of grows as you take care
Hmm.
of them. And
Yeah,
like once the second kid came, it's like we immediately felt a connection to him because
yeah,
we already built a lot of this connection with our first kid and we
right.
understood kind of, I guess, more of what it was like to be a parent.
Yeah. He
Um,
also looked exactly like our first kid. So
yeah,
then it reminded us of our first kid. So then and we already felt that love towards our first kid. So then it was like instant connection.
yeah, and that's something that people don't really tell you, but like when you
Mm.
first have a kid, it's going to be an extremely disgusting experience. It's going to be like this little purple alien coming out, and yeah, maybe don't film it. Like,
Yeah, don't film it. Yeah. So we did like my dad filmed it,
uh-huh.
like, and I just refused to watch the footage because like it's probably not pleasant. Like I just don't want to see myself in my worst possible state.
The whole process of being a parent, the most enjoyable part really is seeing them grow and progress and gain new skills.
Mhm.
So we took an insane amount of video and pictures of our first kid, just because like people don't tell you how quickly this time passes by.
Mhm.
It seems like they're going to be young kids forever, but you actually don't have that many years before they start talking, before they start running around. Both of our kids are now walking around. One of them
Mhm.
can pretty much ride a bike now, and he's starting to say some words. He like pretty much understands all of what we say.
Yeah.
And so it's like if there's only one thing you take away from this entire podcast is that you should take more pictures and more videos of your kids
And
because
try to spend more time with them if you can.
yeah, like we're already starting to forget a lot of milestones and like when exactly something happened. And if we didn't
Yeah.
have those pictures, we wouldn't even remember like what they looked like back then.
Yeah, we don't retain a lot of information from like them growing up. And some like a lot of the times we would just like be in bed like before we go to sleep, we would pull out our phone and revisit some of the
Hmm.
photos and we don't remember most of the videos that we
Hmm.
took. And that's kind of crazy to me.
One thing, which is kind of like a hot topic among parents, is like screen time. I don't
Mm.
really believe that screen time is that bad for you. Like when I grew up, I essentially taught myself English by watching ungodly amounts of TV. Like I'm an immigrant. I immigrated to the US from China when I was 4, and I couldn't speak any English. And so, like, all I could really do was watch TV. And, like, I turned out fine. And I think people, all the people who are so against screen time are probably really old people who don't realize that, like, in the modern world, you can't get away from screens.
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do? You're going to keep your child away from TV and computers and cell phones for forever? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Either that they're really old or they're young and they don't have kids or they're nowhere close to having kids because
Mm.
there's no parent that will tell you don't give your kids screen time.
Yeah, like we try to be a lot more restricting of screen time originally. So we would try to make sure they would only have like maybe 1 hour max per day. And then it just kind of loosened up because like it actually helps their development a lot. Like it
Mm-hmm.
teaches them skills that they otherwise would not learn. So like our kid knows how to do like a bunch of yoga stretching and like
Oh
karate
yeah.
moves and like jumping jacks and all this stuff that like they learn from watching TV.
Yeah, like my son was just cleaning up the other day. Like he moved a box from here into there, and then he just walked away, being like,
Yeah.
how did he learn that?
Obviously, it's not good if all they're doing is watching TV, but like
Yeah,
we take our kids out
they
twice
go
a
out
day,
yeah, twice a
twice a
day.
day, and
They play
they
with
spend
water.
so much time outside that like their
Yeah.
skin is darker than my skin.
Yeah.
Like it's like,
Yeah, our older son, oh, they also have different skin tones. So like
mm,
the younger one's very similar to me, like he's very pale,
mhm.
and then our older son's like just naturally he gets tanned a lot
Well, it's more similar to
easier.
me. If
Yeah.
I spend a ton of time outdoors, like I
Mm.
get really tan as well, and so it's probably, but like
Yeah.
he'll,
So like as soon as the weather became warm, like he is like 3 shades darker already.
yeah. But
Yeah.
I think it's like a lot of people think that like, oh my God, screen time is absolutely terrible for you or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's pros and cons, and people think that there's just like they
Only
only think
cons.
about
Yeah.
cons, but I think right now for us, the pros are outweighing the cons.
Yeah. It's like a lot of the time you really don't have a choice because like if, say for example, Annie or I are looking after both kids at the same time and we need to use the bathroom or something, it's like, oh, I can take one kid, but if our older kid can just sit there watching TV for a little
Hmm.
bit, or like we need to prepare food or we need to do laundry, like there's so many things that you have to like try to keep them safe at the same time. Like you also have to be realistic with what you can actually achieve on your own.
And I think they're actually more attached to the music in the TV show
Yeah.
than the screen because they are completely fine if I just turn on YouTube on my phone, turn off the screen, and just have the music going. Or they're okay with us turning on the TV and like he'll just hop off the sofa and start like doing
Playing.
other
Yeah.
stuff while the TV is in the background. So like they're not glued to the TV.
Yeah. And so if you want to entertain your kids, you don't want to give them TV, just playing music is a great way. Like even
Mm-hmm.
if they're in the back of the car and they're like fussing, if we just turn on kids music, like most of the time they'll calm down. I think a lot
Mm-hmm.
of the times they're just bored, honestly. Like
Yeah.
they want to be entertained. Um, but yeah, I mean, in general, it's like parenthood. We're obviously still going through the journey. Our kids are
Right.
very young. Everyone says these are the best years, not just of the kids, but like of their entire lives. When older people are interviewed and they're asked, when were you the happiest?
Mm-hmm.
Most of them will respond, oh, it's when my kids were really young and I was taking care of them. Like
Mm-hmm.
looking back, um, there are tons of happy moments. Like
Mm-hmm.
there are lots of moments when you're obviously really tired, you're stressed, you're overwhelmed. We're obviously in a very fortunate position to be able to look after our kids and stay home with them. And like, I've actually been a lot more happy than, I mean, in general, I'm not a super happy person. Like, my baseline is probably a bit lower than most normal people. But in terms of like my general happy moments, I haven't experienced as many happy moments as I have now since like childhood, really.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
also read about how like the millennial generation spends fathers particularly spend way more time with their kids than any
Mm.
other generation previously. And so not only are kids seeing more of their parents, but they're seeing more of their parents from both genders. I think it's nowadays, I think before it was mostly the woman who was looking after the kids. So it's like the
Yeah.
guy would be working, who would focus on his career, focus on making money, and then the woman would kind of like become the caretaker, become the mom essentially of these kids and do everything. But now it's like much more accepted for guys to change diapers, guys to feed the kids, guys to like babysit the kids. It's no longer purely just like, oh, it's mom's
Mm.
job. It's like, oh, it's both parents. Like we can both do all these things.
Yeah.
And it's like, I guess not really surprising to me. Like once you've been through it, before I had a kid, I thought like, oh, it'll be so easy, right, for Annie to like be a stay-at-home mom. I'll just like continue working, making a bunch of money at whatever tech job, and
Mm-hmm.
like, Annie can take care of everything at home. And like some people at work would, I got a glimpse of like people were saying like, oh no, like I work full time. My wife is like full time stay-at-home mom, and like I still need to help her out. Like we still send them to daycare sometimes just to like give her a break. And I was like, huh, how does that make sense? Like, is it that hard? And like, yes, it is that hard. Like
Mm-hmm.
you can't really know how tiring it is to raise kids until you do it. Like
Mm-hmm.
everything that we describe here is not going to do it justice. Like you're not
Yeah.
going to get the full experience of all the sleep deprivation, all the stress, all the worrying for your own kids until you have them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I would say that when we had our first kid, um, I definitely had moments like the first 3 months, I regretted having the kid
Oh,
so early.
really?
Yeah,
Mm.
I like when people say like I can't imagine like my life without this kid. I'm like I can't imagine my life without this kid. But then I like kind of got back past that point, and like I don't think I regret having the our kids at the age that we did, but I wish that we had actually taken a year to travel the world
Yeah, I mean the
before.
timing didn't really work out with like COVID and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And actually having both of our kids earlier, I always thought was a better idea just because like the older you get, the more potential there is for health complications. And I don't know, I guess like I want to be young and have energy to actually hang out with my kids. I don't want to be like a super old dude and by the time I'm like 60 or something, my kids are now
Mm-hmm.
just going off to college.
But in terms of like if we're ever going to have another kid,
Annie wants another kid. She really wants a girl. I am against it for the fact that, first of all, we've already replaced ourselves. We've had two people, so two and two
yeah.
cancels out. But also, it's like, I think she's kind of forgotten how tough it was. I actually wanted Annie to go through a surrogacy, even for the second one,
Yeah.
because I just felt like pregnancy was really hard on her body. And like we had the option to do so.
Mm-hmm.
But she really wants to have like a natural pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess my main concern is like about her health, and then also it's like finances is also a question. Like right now we're
Mm-hmm.
doing pretty well with our two kids, but like adding another kid, then it's like okay, maybe then I would have to start thinking about like how do I
yeah.
make some more money?
Go back to work.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically we're going to put it on pause. Like I'm like it would be nice to have one like for me later on, but like at this current situation, I guess we're not gonna have uh,
I think even if
anytime
we
soon.
were to have a third one, we would still wait a couple years.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Parting thoughts, I guess.
Parting thoughts. I will also say that people think that like once the babies are the cutest in their infant stages or when they're a baby, but I've actually enjoyed hanging out with them as they got older, as they acquire more skills and they just get cuter and cuter and like you just love them
Hmm.
more and more every day. Like I
Hmm.
didn't think it was possible to love them more and every day I love them more.
And you're able to communicate with them. So like before
Hmm.
you'd have to guess a lot of the times at what's making them upset, but now it's like they'll tell you. They would be able to gesture. They'll be able to say it,
Yeah.
and that's definitely another level. A
Yeah.
lot of parents have said that it's because they're not teenagers yet. Like once they reach that stage,
Right. Yeah.
they're going to be really hard to deal with.
Hmm.
So I mean, I guess we'll deal
Find
with it.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll find out.
But yeah.
All right. Thanks everyone for listening to episode 6 of the Frankly Speaking podcast. We'll see you soon.